smartest guys around are about to break it down like they've won the game a million times.
Well, actually, they didn't really win the game at all.
Survivor know it all. Survivor know it all. Stephen and Rob without a doubt got the game all figured out. They know it all.
Yes, that's right. It's the Survivor Know-It-Alls with extremely special guest, Dr. Evvie Jagoda. Hollywood Rob Cesternino is living it up with the glitterati in Toronto, but the podcasters of the people, Stephen and Evvie, are here to actually do some of the hard work of analysis on the Survivor episode. Evvie, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so excited to have you here. I thought you were going to be on last week. I was so disappointed not to see you. So getting to see you today is such a thrill. What's going on?
Steven, I'm so excited to be here. I feel like, know-it-alls, this is kind of, I feel like I've made it, man,
That's right.
And,
yes. Yeah.
And know-it-alls, especially with you. I mean, who even needs that other guy,
Right.
Yeah.
Who, he does 1,000 podcasts, like being on a podcast with Rob, like,
that's easy.
Is that special? Yeah. I don't know.
There's only one pod to be on to talk Survivor with Stephen Fishbach, and I'm on it. And this was like maybe the best episode of the season. I think this is a really fun episode.
Oh, lay it on. I agree with you. I love this episode, but lay it on me. Like, give me your raw, unfiltered, takes.
I'm just like hyped. Like that was like a great strategy. I think from all around. We'll talk about it, but I think a lot of people made good decisions, and it was really just like who was gonna outplay each other, which is like what we love. Yeah. Straightforward vote, one person had immunity, and fun scenes of meditating and lobster shell finding. Like, I don't know. I feel like this was like the chef's kiss Survivor episode. I'm hyped.
I totally agree with you. Super, super fun, like great strategy. All these little groups kind of trying to outplay each other. A lot of great camp scenes. But you're seeing a lot of good decisions, and I'm very curious about that because the decision of the episode, the story we were seeing was Carolyn was going to play her idol to save Carson. Ultimately, that did happen, but it wasn't really relevant because what most importantly happened was that Jamie and Lauren flipped. They voted with the Tika 3, and Danny went home. But it's like, so is this to you a good choice? Like, because I am flummoxed by this decision.
Okay, I'm not going to lie to you. I was so hyped that I missed that and assumed that they voted for Carson. In which case, I thought everybody made good decisions. So, okay, no, I don't think that was the right decision for.
Yeah, no, there was a vote split on Danny and Heidi. So it was like everybody,
Gotcha.
and then Danny and Heidi voted for Carson. So there were only 2 votes on Carson. Yeah.
This is why you guys are the pros. going on straight on, even knowing who everyone voted for, that's epic. Okay, no,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, because I think the thing is, as Danny, I think was really correctly saying, the Tika 3 were running the show. They were the tightest 3 in a group of 7. Right. And so it absolutely made sense to try to take one of them out. So I do think, and it also, clearly we don't have a full sense of the relationships on the show, but we haven't seen that Lauren or Jamie have particularly close relationships with any of the Tika 3. That obviously could, there could be more relationships there than we don't know about, but I would think that it really made sense with them to go with that group. I also have a feeling that Jam and Carson are some of the most likable people in the game, and some of the most obvious threats to win the game, at least, from the couch perspective. So yeah, I don't know, questionable move for sure.
All right. Well, I mean, the likability thing is so interesting because, we have this scene where Lauren and Jamie are talking, I think with Danny and Heidi, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be so hard. I think they had one for when they were talking about voting out Jam Jam, and then another similar scene when they were talking about voting out Carson, where they're like, it's gonna be so difficult. He's such a great guy. I love him so much. And then Danny's like, what are you talking about? It's a game. I mean, but it is like those bonds are so deep and so real, and they do, influence your decision making. Do you think that's ultimately what it came down to? Now that you know what actually happened, that like maybe they were like, I just don't, it's just that like raw gut feeling of it's the final 7. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and I would rather keep the nice kid who I like being around, who I enjoy playing with, versus this guy who maybe I don't like as much.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the social relationships that Carson and Jam Jam and Carolyn, honestly, all have had in the game, I think are showing through this whole season, like how good they all are at that. But I also think, we saw Lauren and Jamie talking about how like they finally have agency in this game.
Right.
Like now they felt like they were in the power position, especially we saw Jamie say that. And I did get the sense, Danny was playing super hard. He was playing 100. And I do feel like from time to time was a bit steamrolly in conversations with people. And I could definitely see Lauren and Jamie feeling like they had power in this moment, not enjoying feeling like they were going with Danny's plan, even if it was actually maybe the better move for them. I could definitely see them thinking, this is the final 7, full tilt boogie. We want to take control of the game. And, as I know, that full tilt boogie mentality is not always the path that leads you to making necessarily the right decisions. And I think that drive for agency might have been at play there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting observation, that they want to, like, taking control for them might have meant something different than like taking control for the viewer at home, where like they're like let's get out this guy who we want to get out, who they've wanted to get out for a long time, right? Like the whole Soka Ratu thing. I was just so frustrated. I mean, I love the Tika 3. It's a very fun story to watch. They're all great, fun characters in their own way. And the fact that they're so individually fun and then also working together is really fun. But I also really wanted them to get, you want players to make their best moves. You want to see the game get flipped. You don't want to see this like little trio just like outplay everyone constantly without seeing, why on the other side, like why Lauren and Jamie are making that bad decision.
Yes. I think another thing also, I do think that Carson in particular has done a really good job of managing his threat level. I really think, like, honestly, the illness also probably helped him, like a classic Tyson's shoulder dislocation in Blood versus Water. Like I think like people really are like, yeah, Carson's obviously smart, but like he is the young kid. Like I do think that is potentially playing in when, you have Danny so constantly saying that he's playing at 100, acting like he's playing at 100. Carson is playing at like 150, honestly, but like in, the subtle, possibly, better survivor move. So, you could, Danny put himself really out there as a threat a lot. And eventually if you put yourself out there as the threat, people are going to believe you.
That's a great point. That is a really great point. And also I think it helps that like Carson, Jam Jam, and Carolyn are all kind of types which in the past have been sort of ignored, by Survivor players. Certainly with Carolyn, you have, like it was almost a joke how the older mom type would get to the end and like inevitably get 0 votes. And you see Carolyn playing this very smart game, like sniffing out tonight that Danny was targeting Carson. Like she 100% had him in her sights. But, I do think that there's this sense of, well, they can't win. Like if I'm in the end with them, like I still could win. Although, Danny did say about Carson, like I would vote for him over like the clone of myself.
Right. Well, of course he's going to say that though, right. Yeah.
Well, so I wonder if like some of it comes down to something that Jamie said in Tribal Council, where she says to Jeff, every day is a new day in this game. We vote together for one vote, and then it's a totally different group, that votes in the next group. And like that sort of voting block mentality versus what's actually happening where
Right.
you have these three people who, they're not voting together every time because they didn't, for the Franny vote, but like mostly they're voting together. So I wonder if like part of the issue is that, there is this mentality of, well, every vote is different. We're all switching constantly, but the people who are actually running the game are these three who are sticking true to each other. I mean, A, what do you think? Do you think that's accurate? And then B, did you experience that? Like, was there a sense, was there like almost like pressure, not from production, but from like the game itself to like play a really fluid game?
Yeah, so I 100% think it's accurate that Jamie and probably other people in the game are very convinced, new game every day, the alliances are so fluid. And I think that's obviously to the advantage of the people who actually have an alliance, right? As you said, of the Tika 3. And I actually do feel like something very similar was happening in my season. I think that for me, I feel like going into the merge, Yasa, we had Luvu who had fully 6. And then, we had Ua had 2. 4 Yasas. And I feel like the vibe of us minority tribes were like, oh, the game's really fluid. Like, who knows what's going to shake up? What happened was Luvu voted together like many times, despite constantly them, of course, also pushing the narrative of, oh, I want to get this person out on Luvu. Like, I'm prepared to turn on the rest of my tribe. And that didn't happen for a really long time. And I think that is like, I definitely remember something similar happening in 42 as well. I feel like they went into the merge. There's a lot of talk of like, it's so fluid. There's this brand new alliance. And then that original tribe that was like Lindsay, Omer, Jonathan, Marianne, all stuck together for, until like the final 5 or something, So like, I think that is always going to be the narrative that is pushed by the people who are the ones in the real alliance. You know?
And it's interesting. I mean, like your season was kind of unique because like the bigger group managed to stay together, whereas usually like the smaller group, the smaller, like tighter knit groups who managed to like vote together consistently. But because they entered the merges, like not being much of a threat, they're never perceived as a threat. Like you come into the merge, like these are the people who I need to worry about. And it's so hard to get out of that mentality.
Yes, I really feel like honestly, this like Three Stooges vibe is so cool. And like it really is like as much as I agree that it would be much more exciting to see the shot actually be taken at them. It is like I think this is the thing we're going to remember from this season. And like, is this like really cool threesome that I do think like is the underdog alliance, you know about that well. And to have not a single one of them be someone who you might overtly think of as the obvious threat is obvious, is working for them really well. And I think that's ultimately why Lauren and Jamie probably were like, yeah, of course they are a 3, but we can work with them. You know what I mean? Like, and even at the beginning of this merge, like they were talking as if Carson was still a Ratu from the swap. Like there was a time when they kept saying like, we have the numbers, which included Carson. And I do think like he in particular has done a really good job of having people think that he's with them.
Well, that's a great point that like they still have that sort of sense of being like, this is our group. This is our big group. It's not like you 3. And I mean, we got to talk about it. Like the fire making challenge makes it so it doesn't matter if there's room for 4, so if it was a final 3, it might be a very different situation where you are more afraid of a trio, but now with the final 4, like there could still be a spot for you. And I feel like that sense of there could be a spot really stops people from taking a big swing, earlier when it might actually matter.
I totally see that. I totally see that. And like, I mean, okay, I know this is know-it-alls. We're not here to talk about the edit, but this was how many times we've seen Carson and Fire.
Oh like my gosh, tonight again in the glasses. It's crazy.
Carson in the fire. Carson is in the final 4 fire making. I'm calling it now, calling the shot. Like it's gotta be.
Is that where he wins or is that where he loses?
I think he wins. I think you foreshadow that it's been in an epic way. You know what I mean? I don't know. That's my.
I think that's where I think like Carson is like the big strategist threat. And that's where he goes out. Like that's but I mean I could really I've sworn not to talk about edit, so I because I've been so wrong about it.
But Carson's the guy. He practiced all the puzzles. He practiced last gas in the bathtub. That boy's been making fire. Come on.
Yeah, that's right. You're right. That's right. Yeah. But I practice fire too. I mean, like, it's very different in your kitchen, it's not
I know. Because you can never find a thing that's a good enough machete, like a knife parallel. That's the problem.
Well, that's exactly it. Because it's like a dull machete. Like where are you gonna get a dull machete from? And I think, and this is truly like a swing, I think he loses to Heidi and we saw Heidi making fire, I think in the first episode, right? So,
oh, I like that. I mean,
Yeah.
I gotta say, I feel like Heidi is like on razor's edge, but I do think she has a lot of things going for her in the game. I think with Danny out, she's way less of a threat to people. She's got an idol that nobody knows about. And I do think she's someone that could really make a case for herself at the end of the game. So, yeah, that I definitely could see that. And especially if she's now like the person who was all alone for these next couple of votes and comes out with the fire making win. Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I really think she's going to be right there in the final three. I don't necessarily think she wins, but you know, that's as you say is a conversation for a later day. So,
Yeah.
Who do you think is the biggest threat of the? You know, let's say it's just the Tika 3 in the end. Who wins?
Wow. I mean, it's tough. I mean, and we also haven't even talked about Carolyn's decision to play the idol, which is obviously relevant to, you know, and so I think, you know, I'd say, I feel like the common wisdom would be, you know, obviously she was correct. Well, I mean, people were coming for Carson, but then she was incorrect that it was the majority.
Yeah.
But and obviously now she has put a target on her back on some level. She lost the idol, but still, I really believe that Carolyn needs to make public displays of power in the game to get that respect. I think like if she doesn't start doing that now, I don't know, like given how much everyone just like laughs when she talks, like she was actually very upset at this tribal council and everyone's like laughing.
Even Jeff sort of kind of like this, like, you know.
Yeah, it's honestly like very like off kilter to like watch from home, I feel like. But I obviously I'm not trying to like criticize the other people, but it's like she had genuine feeling and everyone's laughing. So I think she really did need to up her threat level, even though, you know, you saw in the next time on that people are maybe thinking about her as more of a threat. But I do think that was one of those moves where otherwise she gets to the end and I don't know that she can win. And now I think if she gets to the end, I do think she has even if it wasn't strictly speaking necessary, I think it was a good move I knew that Carson was a threat. I had this idol that nobody knew about and I played it and he got 2 votes. You know what I mean? It was, you know, like, so.
Right.
I think that was good. I mean, it seemed like people were saying that Jam Jam was the biggest threat of the 3. He was the original target.
Right.
I do think that Carson could probably make a great case for himself, but I do wonder, again, when someone is underestimated in a lot of ways, how much they can turn it around. But that also has been the story of all the new era winners so far.
I mean, I was going to say, how can someone as young as Carson win? I mean, then like, you know, Marianne won 2 seasons ago. But I mean, I do think I think it has to be an uphill battle to some degree for a really young kid, right? Because when you're thinking, I mean, you've been on the jury, like tell me your perspective. Like when you're thinking about that decision of who you're going to give $1 million to, like you think about their life, you think about the skull, or do you? I don't know. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the spread, you know what I mean? And how much, like, I remember thinking, you know, when I was in my most like bitter stage of being on the jury, you know, and the first couple of days after being voted, I was like, well, I don't know, Danny's got a young kid. I didn't know he was in the freaking NFL at the time, you know? So, you know, just like don't know what's actually, but then ultimately I do think it's the new era. I think most people are voting on gameplay or like gameplay that they can justify themselves as a winner gameplay. Like Rob, I think it was last week on Know What I was talking, you guys were talking about, you know, or maybe it was actually with Adam. I don't know. People are talking about what juries vote for. And I do think it is definitely a big part of who do you like, who do you respect. And I think that respect piece is the one that honestly, both Carolyn and Carson, I think are going to have the uphill battle for. But I think that like, when I think about Carson versus how I was thinking about Xander in the game, Xander also had that young guy thing, which I think was definitely working against him. For me personally, it was the combination of like young and I felt like I had been playing him at the beginning of the game. So like he had a big uphill battle and then made what I think a lot of us on the jury thought was the wrong decision at fire, took Erica, you know, so it kind of reinforced that he's young and look at these mistakes.
Right. That's interesting.
You know, I don't think that Carson has any obvious mistakes. I think Carson is someone that could get to the end of the game and say, I was in on all these alliances. I was the only one that knew XYZ. You know, I mean, I think he has that. And I don't know in the same way with where Xander, there was these questionable things. I don't know if he has those. So I think he might be able to overcome it in more of like a Marianne type way.
Yeah, the only thing I worry about with Carson is that people would because everyone thinks of him as the little buddy, they're going to say, Carson was always the other guy, right? He was always like, and he maybe they don't see him as a driver as much. You said, the thing that Carolyn would need to do is to be more, make herself known more. And as you're coming from a season that did award someone who, many felt did not make themselves known, right? It was from a winner who we felt like we didn't see that big strategic play from, what would Carolyn have to do? I mean, the idol play is certainly a beginning, but
yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the biggest things when you are that person is to be really making those big moves in front of the jury.
Yeah.
And like, so for Erica, some of the things that really won us over were like how strong she was at tribal council. Like when Deshaun did his like truth bomb thing and she's like proudly being like, "You're welcome for saving you." You know what I mean? That's epic. Yeah. And we don't know the full story. Like, we don't know how much Erica actually did save him, but it sure seemed like she did. And that was cool. You know what I mean? And I think the jury seemed very impressed. I think that Carolyn had the idol. Nobody in the game knew about that.
Yeah.
So I do think that there is the potential. I mean, we've heard when Carolyn like tells her story about like her sobriety and everything, like I think she really, can you still hear me, Stephen? Okay, great.
Well, did you?
My computer just went into screensaver mode. So yes, I think big moves in front of the jury, like those kinds of like standing strong. And I do think that she needs to like do things like this idol play where she can claim it independently from Carson and Jam Jam. I think her biggest problem will be being with Carson and Jam Jam at the end. I think for each of them, their case is much stronger against non-Tika players than against the others, right?
Yeah, for sure. Now, do you think like, even though it wasn't like strictly necessary, you think like the idol play is a net positive for Carolyn?
I honestly really do. I think if she gets to the end and does the Marianne of like, see, I had this the whole time.
Right.
I think that goes more into like, cool. Carolyn had the idol.
Right.
Then like, she was aware. She obviously was, weighing that decision really heavily. I think, I don't know. I think it's more impressive to play the idol. I also think if you get to the end, I mean, another thing working against Xander on our jury was that he had the idol the whole time. And at a certain point, it was like, oh, well, no one's targeting him. So that's why he's had the idol the whole time. So maybe he's not that big of a threat. Carolyn, I think, would also suffer from that as well. So I think actually using the idol in a pretty strategic way, in a way that it's like, it really made sense for the other people to all be voting for Carson. So like, I think she could make the case that, that was a good move. And I definitely think Danny, I got to say, is the kind of player that goes to the jury being like, that was awesome that they got, he's upset, but he like wanted to be taken out by a good move. And I think he's honestly the kind of player that will vote for the person that got him out because he thinks he's the best. So therefore they're the best for getting him out,
Well, that's like a perfect transition into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which was basically Danny. Like, first of all, a character I really, really enjoyed. I mean, I want your like overall impression of Danny, but one thing that really stood out to me this episode was just this pragmatic worldview that seemed to dominate all of his conversations. Right out of the gate, he says to Heidi, even if it was you who voted for me, I'm down to work together. We certainly heard that about, with Franny, he like saved her with the idol, even though he knew she was targeting him. Then he like the next, then 2 votes later, she's out the door because like he's moved on to the next thing. He had this quote tonight: if someone else needs what I need, I trust them. If they don't need what I need, I don't trust them. Ultimately it felt like, I mean, that's a very almost game body that you'd never call Danny a game bot way of looking at the game. But I did wonder if like that philosophy was so true for him, but like he couldn't see that it wasn't as true for other people. And I mean, we saw like him just like being incapable of understanding that Heidi would vote for him. Like, why would she do that? It wasn't like, that was not her, like, in her like checkbox of best interests. I mean, do you think that, like, where's your overall take on kind of that mentality of today, this is what I need right now, and therefore I can trust these people, versus like, do you lose kind of sight of other aspects of the game?
Right. Totally. I mean, it's, when he was saying that, I was like, that is smart. Like that is extremely logical. And it did make logical sense for all 4 of those people to vote together. It really, really did. And I think you're exactly right, though, that the game is not just what do I want, how do I see the game, but how do other people see the game? And I think when you're Danny in those conversations and other people are saying, oh, it would like be so hard to vote that person out. And you're like, no, it wouldn't.
Exactly.
Maybe you need to think about the fact that other people are telling you that it would be hard to vote that person out, you know?
Yeah.
And I do think that like people can get very tunnel vision on their way. I mean, Jamie's out there saying there's no alliances. That's not right either, you know?
Yeah.
So I think like there's a lot of people wanting to think that the game is going the way that it is, which is extremely understandable. And I think it really is that expert level survivor play that where you can say, you know, I know what I want. I also know what that other person wants, not what they should do, but what they want. And I think that is like a very hard skill. And I think that is really what separates. It's not the full tilt boogie. It's that separates like the, you know, the champs from the good players.
That's a really, really, really great point. It's just like feeding into like other people's like emotional needs or like, you know, as opposed to like, I mean, I you know, you're right that like entry level or like maybe like intermediate level survivor is saying like, this is that person's best move. And they probably realize that this is their best move. But then like, what is like their whole, you know, mess of, because it's not like the casting department is looking for the most logical players, you know, like that's not how they're casting.
Right. I mean, and I do think we saw this in the way that Danny was talking to people. Like, I think in the last episode, when he says to Heidi, you know, we don't need you. Yeah. That's not a great way to talk to your number one ally on Survivor. And it's like, he was thinking, I'm sure it's still logical for her to vote with me. I also don't technically need her vote, but ultimately you need her to feel really good about you, you know? And I think ultimately, like, I think I was really worried, for example, for like Jam and Carson, that they were not understanding Carolyn's emotional needs last episode. But ultimately they did have the right read on, she will be upset, she will come back to us. And I think like, it's really like, how well do you know the people you're playing with in a game where everyone's trying to make sure you don't know them, you know? Yeah.
I mean, what did you think of that conversation at the start of the episode with Carolyn, Jam, and Carson, where, you know, I was sort of surprised that Jam was like, get over it. You know, he wasn't like, like, I'm sorry, I love you, you know, let's take some time. It was like, move on.
I know. I was pretty surprised by that. I did kind of, though, I think it was like, it just did seem like very, very real when he was like, you did that to me, remember? And she was like, he's like, I got over it. You need to get over it. She's like, this just happened. You know what I mean? But that did feel just like actual human thing of like, and I do feel like Carolyn that's the thing, is Carolyn is really has big emotions, is not afraid to show them. And he is a smart survivor player. And I think that they understood that she would still trust them the most ultimately, or like, would their interests still align the most? And that honestly, maybe the right move is to be strict. Like, I think Carolyn does not like being bullshitted to. Sorry, I don't know if we're allowed to curse on here. You know,
I think that's okay. I think that one's allowed.
Yeah.
Don't get more blue than that, but yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. And so I think like for Jam actually being straightforward of like, I did this because of this, and you need to get over it, is actually maybe the better way than just like now being like, I'm so sorry. It's like, you're obviously not that sorry because you did it.
That's
like,
interesting. Right. It just sounds phony, and she's going to pick up on it. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
One thing I was curious about with Carolyn too is, you know, her talking about how sleepless she is and how that's like affecting her mental state. And I certainly had that experience where, you know, it's so hard to think through. I mean, you know, she stood there like, and I want to talk too about her vote for Lauren, her like cross-out vote for Lauren. But, so, you know, was that a big part? Like, did that, you know, were you subject to sleeplessness? Like, did that affect your game in many ways?
Oh my God, definitely. I think the sleep is like, it's like sleep and rain, and obviously they go together, right? You know, like, and I think those nights, like, I mean, I remember so clearly, like in the Survivor game, I could tell you what the sky looked like at 3 a.m. versus 4 a.m. versus 5 a.m. because the lighter it meant that the morning producers were coming and we were saved. Like the night was over, you know, like, and it genuinely felt that way like almost every night. So like the sleep thing is so hard. And like, no, I mean, I got voted out. I didn't even remember that. I mean, I knew that Xander had an extra vote, and I didn't remember that could have freaking saved me. Like, because it's the brain, the food, the sleep. And, you know, when you don't have those things, you just actually cannot work things out to the degree that you're used to. And I think it also, you're not even like, it's honestly like, you can feel tired, but I couldn't perceive how much my brain wasn't working until it started working again, you know? And so like, I think honestly being like like vocal of like, I'm sleep deprived and I'm like not sure is like some like good like gut check on like what's actually happening to you.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. I like there was I remember one tribal council when it had been raining, torrentially for 3 days. I hadn't slept in 3. Like I literally could not form a coherent sentence. I mean, let alone like try to like, figure out 8 people, in all of their, iterations of strategic trust clusters.
Yeah.
And I do think that's like an underappreciated part of
Yeah.
when people make, subpar moves or act, in a way that it's like not strategically ideal. Like, and that's what makes Survivor such a tough game, is just like, there is this really like physical component of it.
Yeah, it's like your brain is not working to its full capacity and your sense of reality is so unstable. Like, and so that's why, for people watching at home of like, Lauren and Jamie, that's so dumb. It's like, you don't know what's actually real at all. Like you like, they could have been having conversations of like, wait, what are we doing? Danny's obviously the threat. Like, you know what I mean? What, Carson's a bigger threat than Dan? Like you don't know what the people on the jury are thinking. You don't know what's real. And it's just like, that is why it's not like the hardest best game,
What was the deal with Carolyn's Lauren vote? Explain that to me. The crossed out Lauren vote.
Okay. Wait, so let's talk this out, because as you know, I came in here not knowing where the votes actually were. Okay, so if she had stuck her vote on Lauren in the end, then it was it would have been 2 Danny, 2 Carson, 1
because Carolyn voted. Wait, so Heidi votes, I think, were Jamie and Lauren, and then the 3 Danny votes, I think, were the Tika 3. So it would have been 2-2-2 with 1 Lauren. Maybe she was just thinking like this. Maybe she wanted the 2-2 split,
Yeah.
Or maybe she was thinking like, this is just in case they both play idols, or I mean, she probably had. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, because in the configuration it was 2 on Carson, 2 on Danny. No, it was
3 on Danny.
3 on Danny.
Yeah, and 2 on Heidi.
And 2 on Heidi. Yeah. So if Heidi, wait.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's right. It's 7. It's like, it was like 2
7.
cars.
I'm thinking 6 now. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So, I think she was afraid of another idol. I mean, which she was correct about, that there was another idol, So if it had been like, if in the scenario where her group all puts votes on Danny, all the other votes are on Carson, both Carson and Danny have idols played on them, which was not an impossible situation, then it's 0-0-0, and then she could be voted for, right?
Yeah.
So I think that maybe it was a potential hinky vote kind of vibe.
And it could have just been like her, like trying to figure out, this person is the most. I mean, it's also like, you don't, especially when you've got this group of people who you think is voting one way, but you don't know for sure. It could have been her just like, well, I think that they're with me, but there's also like a 30% chance that they're voting this way. And if I do that, so, she ultimately changes her mind. But I do think it was maybe like protect against it blowing up in her face.
Yeah. Which is fair. Okay. But also, we must say, is this the second vote cross out in Survivor history, both with just like straight up, very obviously able to read the
original vote?
Like, do you think are the producers saying, no, you wrote it down, you must have it there? Because like, why would you not put a freaking box over that thing? I mean, come on. Don't worry, Lauren. I did vote for you, but I did change my mind. It's all good. Like,
that's such a great point. That is such a really great point. I mean, because like, Lauren leaves that tribal council being like, oh my gosh, these people who I thought I was voting with, they considered voting me out.
Yeah, and like not just considered, wrote it down.
Right.
Like, that is different.
Oh, that's such a good point. So yeah, future Survivor players, do the full scrub out. No,
it's worth it. She already was up there for 5 minutes, like keep going, oh man, like that's basically, I mean, I can't imagine Lauren not caring about that. That's
of course. My gosh.
Yeah.
I want to talk about another question that, so this is more of a general question about tribal council, which has been, a real sticking point for many in the community, is just how many analogies there are at tribal council. Because I think about my days in Tocantins, and Jeff was asking questions like, so Sydney, you're wearing Joe's shorts, like how does JT, what do you think about that? Taj, like, you're a little bit older, does that make you like mad that Sydney is like wearing the Joe's shorts? Like, are you getting those questions? And are people just really good at like avoiding them, or are they not coming?
Yeah, what a good question. I mean, I feel like I can't remember too many specific questions like that coming. I think it does really depend on the personality of the cast to some degree. I mean, I really remember like in our first tribal council, Tiffany and Tiffany saying something like, biting things about Abraham in a like, I know it's me versus him kind of vibe. And she went for it because she's the kind of person that's going to go for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's possible that these casts are just now like, I mean, I know that no matter what question you asked me, I was not going to say something like that. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not how I play the game. So like, I do think that it's possible that everyone's sidestepping, but I don't remember Jeff actually saying like, what do you think of Deshaun? You know, like, oh, Deshaun just outed you. Like, do you like that? You know what I mean? Like, it's really not those kinds of questions. And also, by the way, did not understand the like fighter thing at all. Like, I did not understand.
That was it was so confusing. Like Carolyn was saying, we have off days and the next days are scrambles. And then Danny was saying that we're fighters, so we prep. I mean, I honestly don't get I don't even get the disagreement. Yeah.
I mean, there's also like, I mean, there was a big fight at camp, like with the whole Carolyn Jam thing. You would think that would be the kind of thing of Jeff saying, you know, what happened after last tribal? It seemed like you were upset, Carolyn. You know what I mean? Like that could be really, I would be shocked if he didn't ask that. But I mean, yeah, it does seem like these tribal question sessions don't have the oomph that they once had, you know?
Yeah. I mean, he would go through, I mean, maybe he didn't do this anymore, but like, who's pulling their weight? Who's not pulling their weight? You know, really try and like put the screws to us for, you know, the real specifics of, you know, the group dynamics. But I mean, it also could be a question of his interest, you know, if he's bored with that level, that line of inquiry.
That's what I was just about to say. I think he doesn't care about that much. Like, I actually don't, you know, like yeah.
I also wanted to note that Carson, when he, you know, when Jeff asked that question to Carson, like, you know, what if it is you tonight, what do you take away from this? And he, you know, this really beautiful line about how he was younger and he was coming in, you know, and he was playing with all of these more experienced players. I thought that, you know, maybe you could learn, you know, what did you say? Aged contestants? Or
Listen, Carson's taking everything I do to the next level. You know, I had homemade beads. He's lit 3D printing stuff. You know, I'm saying elder people, you know, I had champagne. You know, so
that's right. Exactly. As elder people, that's great.
Later years.
Yeah.
Which was, I thought that
more
was
experience.
Nicer. Yeah, more experience. It's pretty good. Yeah. Tiffany, no one lets me live that one down. So, I'm glad we revived it here. I do think, by the way, for the Carson, I think with all of these new era winners that have been underestimated in the game, the key is both stating that is your strategy, that you know that people will underestimate you, and also like just being, I think the self-awareness of that is huge. And I do think Carson like has that potential to like really know that, I hope, of like, you all are older and wiser and more experienced than me, and I learned so much from you. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. I don't know. Did you watch the Australian Survivor season?
Not yet. I really want to.
Well, you have to.
I'm waiting till I have a month free, and then I'm going to.
Yeah, right. You do need a month for that. Well, I won't spoil it for you, but the winner, I think, made a good case of that, of a very like, here, I learned this from you and you know what I mean? Which I do think people really like. Like, I do think the ego of the jury is a huge factor, and, you know, feeling good about that. And people are either going to feel like Carson was my kid brother and I don't want to lose to my kid brother, or are going to feel like I taught him everything he knows and him winning is me winning. You know what I mean?
And that's sort of what Gabler did last season, was kind of being like, I was in your group and I was in your group, you know, I mean, that's, in a really smart way. I mean, James Jones was on a couple of weeks ago.
Oh my God, he was so good, by the way. Amazing.
And his point, I mean, basically it's very similar point to what you just made of it. Like, you know, it's all about the person presenting that they're aware of what they're doing, that it's not necessarily like some big resume or the splashiest move. Although those people aren't necessarily making it to the end as much anymore either. But having, you know, just knowing, being able to articulate what your strategy was and being aware of like your perception, which is such an interesting kind of new metagame.
Yes, it really is. Because I think it's also like, you know, in this era, people don't, I think actually big move era Survivor is kind of over. We're in the postmodern thing where people still are making big moves, but that actually is not the way people are winning the game, like at all. And I do think that is because, you know, there's, I think, a sense in this like super fast game of like, yeah, you can like throw everything against the wall and some of those will be cool big moves, but like, was that a calculated game? I think people really want to see what were you doing overall, which is kind of different.
That's interesting.
Than the resume. Yeah, so, like I think it was huge of like, it was like Erica was like, I came into this game and I knew that I would be underestimated. And that like from day one, that is how I started. And I thought about it like in that arc the whole time, you know, and that was very convincing. And that was the truth of her game. You know what I mean? And like, it was also, I think for me, and I think for a lot of the other people on the jury, was like, yes, that was a smart game plan. I considered that game plan. I tried to do that game plan, but that's not my personality at all. And, you know, and so I do think like being able to articulate that full game strategy and that full game self-awareness is a lot more compelling than I did this thing and I did that thing.
That's so interesting. Even if Danny like gets to the end or got to the end, you know, and he's got, you know, oh, I played this idol for Franny, but someone else is going to say like, hey, then you voted Franny out like 2 days later. Like, so what was the point of that? I've heard, you know, different. I had the perspective that I did not think that was a great decision for Danny to play an idol for someone who would then vote out a couple days later. Others disagreed. They said, you know, that made sense for him in that moment. He was trying to get rid of Brandon. You know, then later Franny's the threat. Like, do you? I mean, it sort of gets back to the thing we were talking about earlier in terms of like how new is each day. But like on this 26-day season, on this like, you know, hyper fast season, how new is it? I mean, it has to be a little bit new. I mean, yeah.
Right. I mean, well, I think it is and it isn't, because I think actually the interesting thing is when you have these votes that are like consecutive days, there's actually less time for things to change. You know what I mean? Like, I really felt that like those first couple, you know, I ended up like getting out the day after. It was like Tiffany got voted out. The next day was the split tribal where I ultimately went home. I felt like things were shifting, like really were shifting, but then there wasn't enough time for them to shift enough. So then people just went back to what they had been doing. You know what I mean? So I actually think ultimately the speed can actually make people, they don't have enough time to think through all the decisions. And it's like, okay, let me just do the easier thing, you know? Yeah.
And I wonder if that affected Lauren and Jamie too tonight, where they're like, well, like I don't know, let's just get the big Soka guy out.
Yeah.
I mean, do you feel like there's not enough time to develop plans, or do you feel like people are so quick now that they can kind of, you know, turn on a dime?
I think there's enough time to develop plans. I don't think I mean, obviously I've only played this one version, but I think like, I do think like there's not necessarily as much time for like big picture relationships to shift.
Yeah.
Like, I think we have seen that these, even though it's not like we've had any like pagongings per se in the new era, but I actually do think these like tribal alliances actually, like in definitely in my season in 42 here, there is like some tribal alliances that have stuck together for a long time, actually longer than in some of these 39-day games. Because I do think ultimately it's like we have double as much time with these people as the other people. Ultimately, that's working for me. I'm going to keep going with it, instead of like, wow, now I've been with the merge tribe for like 10 more days. And it's like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean,
that's interesting.
Yeah. I really do think that the relationships are a lot more, I still feel like so much closer to the Yasa people, you know what I mean? Because like the merge time was like, bam, 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 you know, like, so, yeah.
So give me some overall thoughts on this season. Which is the best season of the 40s? Is it 42 or 44?
Okay, well, obviously it's 41. Yeah, no bias there at all. Yeah. Okay, well, I mean, honestly, rankings are arbitrary and reductive, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
But no, I think there is something. I mean, production decisions questionable in this season. Like, I personally thought the bird. I really didn't like the fake idols in the bird cage. Like, it's just like, what is that? Like, personally, I didn't like that. However, I do think that this merge configuration is one of the most interesting in like a long time in Survivor. Like the 3-3-3 that we had, and like it's still shifting. Like, I don't think we've had, correct me if I'm wrong, I can't remember a season like that. Yeah. And I think that's like really special and cool. And the fact of like that somehow within that, this 3 really has stuck together, the like, underdog 3. I honestly think the edit a little bit gave it away that this 3 was going to be the thing. But I think if you just looked at the lay of that land, it's such an interesting, surprising way for it to work out that these like two bigger groups could not get it together and let this small group, like that's always a fun structure. And so I actually think this is one of the most interesting configurations in like a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited. And like, even still, like in this next round at 6, it's like supposedly, you know, Tika has quote the numbers, except they're 3 and 6. So do they? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
It's very, it's very funny. They keep on saying it. We got the numbers. We got them. Like, well, but I do think like if you have a tight 3 and you're, you know, no one's going to go to rocks to break that up, especially because again, like of that final of the fire challenge, you know, because you always have that potential of being that last person who sneaks in, and maybe you're like, well, it's good if I'm with like the Tika 3 and I'm the other one, you know, like then I get like people might like me as the sort of, you know, the underdog.
Right. Well, I mean, and it's a 3. They're the tight 3 clearly, but Heidi does have an idol.
Yes.
And, you know, I mean, obviously it's going to be so tempting for her to keep that idol for one more round. And then she's guaranteed right into the 4.
Yeah.
You can play the idol at 5, right? Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
So it's like, but she could also make a big move and get one of the Tika 3 out with an idol at 6. And maybe that's like a important, like I was about to say important resume point, but I don't want to negate the earlier thing that I said, but I think it's about, not about resume, like check it off, I did a move, but it's about that overall vibe of like, Heidi's someone who's really been in the game, but has she like had agency in the game?
Right.
Oh yeah, look at that move that she made that showed that she had agency in the game. You know what I mean?
And like, you just need one. I mean, like that's sort of been my feeling. Like you kind of just need one.
Well, I think you need one in a broader story. I really do. Like, I think like Heidi's someone, she has been in the mix the whole game. You know what I mean? And I think she's the kind of person that people could be like, I could see myself voting for Heidi if she like does something that blows me away.
Yeah.
I think there are people that their reputation is such that even one move can't put them over the edge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think it's all about fitting within that thing. And also people feeling like that was a big move that made a lot of sense. Like, I do think if Danny had gotten to the end, that thing of like, well, you played an idol on her, that was a big move, but then you voted her out and she was trying to vote you out. So like, was that a good move? That's not as compelling, maybe. I do think actually though, for Danny, I do think in this logic of you need a cohesive, self-aware story, I do think his narrative was clear. I am playing like full tilt this whole game. And he really was. And I really just want to say, like, I think it was like, he was a very fun and like really brought a lot to this season. And I think like he really was, you know, like moving a lot of this game along. And so like, I hope he's feeling proud of himself because, you know, he certainly brought a lot to the season.
That's a great point. I love Danny as a character. Just like, I didn't always agree with his strategy, but I mean, you know, what do I know? I'm, you know, just watching a very edited show, and just like all of the fun he brought, you know, just doing random rolls everywhere, like down the path, you know, flips in every challenge, very fun confessionals. And that De Niro face at the end when Jeff is like trying to keep it, you can see the Jeff like, you know, was so good. Do you have a good De Niro face?
I do not. Don't make me try to do it on a
okay. I'm not going to put you on the spot. Maybe you can work on a De Niro face. Oh, yeah. Well, maybe we'll both work on De Niro faces.
Yeah. This cast has had such good vote out like lines. Like, so we've got this like weird but very memorable De Niro moment.
Yeah.
Kane's enjoy your rice, bitches.
Yeah.
Franny's taking off her belt. Like there's a lot happening.
Very fun. It's a very fun, quirky cast, and it's been really fun to watch.
And everyone meditates.
Breathing in different ways. Yes.
Yeah.
Let's take some questions. I think we already have some questions. All right. BK wants to know, if Carson didn't choose to align with Jam Jam and Carolyn, would the season be as good, and would Tika have dominated so much?
Well, I mean, certainly Tika wouldn't have dominated as much if it was 2 instead of 3. I think this 3 has been a magic 3. And I do think Carson really, I mean, his relationship with the Ratu, I think, was like a huge part of this that wasn't told as much directly always in the story. But I think that was like a really, really big part of why this group was so successful for a long time. But I think he individually, I think, would be in a good spot, even if he did some other things. But I think I think this 3 is like what's been driving the season. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Carson was in that very early vote. You know, he was the swing vote between Helen and Carolyn, and it was thank God. You know, he made
oh my God, so true.
I'm sure Helen would have been iconic and amazing too, but Carolyn is really an all-timer.
Yeah.
All right, Lexa Power wants to know, what was Carolyn counting in the voting booth? What all options do you think she went over in her head? Well, we sort of talked about this, but do you have any kind of other
Definitely.
summations?
No, I mean, I think, and it's one of those things, as you said, with the sleep deprivation. I mean, I literally am right now was struggling to talk out like what was happening, and it's going to be 1,000 times harder for them out there. So like, I think, ideally you want to do that before you get into the booth, but better late than never.
Yeah. All right, Lexa Power also wants to know, question, would Jam Jam have gone home tonight if he didn't win immunity? Would Danny and the other non-Tikas have targeted him instead of Carson? Who do they perceive as the biggest threat of Tika?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, the show presented it as Jam Jam was the initial target. So you have to assume that means that he is, at least among the people in the game, perceived as the bigger threat of them. I think no matter what, Carolyn's going to figure out that they are voting for one of the Tikas. Like, I mean, it makes sense to vote for one of the Tikas. So I think the idol's probably getting played, but I don't know.
Yeah, although I do wonder if Lauren and Jamie would not have, they would have stayed voting out Jam Jam because maybe like they don't have that same, feeling towards him. Like, because like you were saying, like he was a Ratu, like Carson was a Ratu, like maybe they don't have that kind of loyalty towards Jam Jam.
Right. That's a really good point. And maybe because Jam Jam was perceived potentially as the bigger threat, it would be more obvious for them. No, we got to keep it on Jam Jam. Whereas maybe Carson's threat level is a little lower. The relationships with him is a little better. But I still do think that Carolyn was going to figure it out and play the idol on whichever of those two Tikas. I personally do. Yeah.
Although I wonder if, Carson's like, oh, my name is out there so much. I'm hearing my name so much. It's possible that Lauren or Jamie like told them, because they were obviously more allied with the Tikas than they were with the Ratus. Like maybe that's how Carolyn figured it out. I mean, she did seem to have like a sense of it and she could like see through Danny, but it's very possible that one of the, like either Lauren or Jamie just said like, hey, they want to vote you out.
Yes. No, it's very possible. And this was actually just on the relationships of all these people. We are obviously trying to like figure it out from the limited information that we have. But I do think we also saw a bunch of conversations with Carson and Danny at various points in the season that like made no sense given what we had seen on the show. And I was wondering, like, when Jam Jam was the one that told Danny that Heidi voted for him, another great scene of someone being truthful in this season and being instantly considered a liar because of it. I wonder how that would have gone if Carson was the one that told Danny. Like, it seemed like maybe that was actually the better relationship and that Carson might have been able to say it in a way that Danny would have heard more like authentically.
That's a really great point. I mean, both because Carson is so good at speaking authentically and because people just are maybe less inclined to trust Jam Jam. That's a really great point. Yeah. And also a great point about how many wonderful moments this season people are speaking the truth and totally disbelieved. And I wonder if like, is that like, it's just so great.
It's so funny. It's so funny. I really like, can you think of any examples of that in your Survivor time? Like, I really like, there's nothing like that comes to my mind of like someone told me a true story. I mean, the story that Jamie told about her votes, the idol being with Kane, is like, yeah, that's like convenient, I guess, but it also like is a very convoluted story in a way where it's like, that isn't a lie because it's convoluted, but also I totally get why you would think it's a lie.
Yeah. I mean, I have like, I can certainly think of like lies I believe I shouldn't have believed, but like, someone coming and just like giving me, I mean, there's little things, right? But like nothing like the consistency. I mean, there was one time when like Jeremy came and was like, we can't trust Spencer. And I'm like, you're crazy. Spencer's not, Spencer would never turn on us. But like, but that's, those are like kind of little things, like not like the specific of like this person voted for you for this reason,
Right.
Yeah.
And Heidi, of course, with the T-Bird Cooper memorial, it was me,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Do you want to take this question from Elizabeth?
Okay. Elizabeth says, are there always this many bad reads in Survivor? Okay. Very relevant. Like Danny's read that Heidi didn't vote for him and Jamie's fake idol shenanigans. Or are we just seeing more bad reads this season?
Yeah. It's a question. I don't know.
I mean, it does seem like obviously also we're being shown the ones that are like this, right? There's probably also a bunch of lies that people are correctly not believing and truths that people are believing, but it does seem like also people are, the interesting thing is that there has been so much open information in this season in a way that I think is surprising. Like everybody knew that Jamie had an idol already, even though actually she didn't, but like, and so I think maybe that's contributing to this where like when there's so much information out there, then it's like rife for you to like potentially make good or bad reads about,
Well, that seemed to be the case for the last few seasons, which has been absolutely flummoxing to us old timers on the know-it-alls. And I'm curious, like, I mean, as the kickoff to the 41s, and maybe it was less true for you guys, but it does seem like, because you guys were, saw the advent of knowledge as power, and
Right.
a lot of these things that are now coming, to fruition or have now become like part of the game, you were seeing for the first time. But it does seem like people, like everybody knows everything. And like, the fact that Marianne had a secret, like there was one thing that was kept secret from other people was like basically her closing argument at her final tribal council.
Right. Well, I mean, and part of that is obviously the structure of how a lot of the advantages have come about in the new era. Like in my season, everyone did know where the idols were because you literally had to say a secret phrase that was available for other people in the game to know about, like, and even if you didn't know what someone got, you knew they went to Shipwheel Island. You know what I mean? So it's actually like the game has made it. And of course, in this season, you got the birdcage and, like there's all these kind of much more public structures for finding that. And it's not surprising that Marianne had a secret, which was that she found an idol in like the old fashioned way if there was an idol in a tree, you know what I mean? Or whatever. And so, part of that is just like the way that these things are happening.
Well, what's your take on that, Evvie? Do you like that these advantages are more public information, or did you like it when they were when they were more secret?
I mean, I think it's very fun when you it's fun to watch players be able to like work the system. You know what I mean? And like, obviously there's like the magic of, oh shit, like Kelly Wentworth had an idol and no one knew, and she got all like, she cut us in on the vote. And that is an epicness. But I do think there is a lot of fun strategy that comes from this person has knowledge is power, and they're going to think that this person has the idol. So we need to figure out how to, you know what I mean? Like that is like really fun. Yeah. So when the players can like, I do think it was getting very stale of like, it's just whoever magically found the idol in the tree, and there's like no way for anyone to know about that. I think it is really fun of like, people know what's out there. They're trying to work with it. They're trying to work around it. They're trying to scheme around it. Jamie and the Ratus tried to make a good decision of let's hide the idol because the knowledge was power. And then King got voted out with it. Like that is the fun. That's fun.
Right. Or last season, Jesse getting the idol that Dwight had, which was Janine's, for all those reasons. Yeah. Okay. So Cricket T wants to know, next question. What format from a returning player season would Evvie like to play in if invited back? Oh, that's a good one.
Wow. Well, if I was invited back, I would probably want it to be fans versus favorites, because that always does well for the favorites.
Yeah, exactly. Half the cast is basically eliminated out of the gate. Yeah.
But if it was you, question person, and you were one of the fans, obviously we'd work together. Not you.
All right, Olivia Ruth wants to know, seeing how fiercely loyal Carolyn is, would Jam and Carson potentially voting her out mean a guaranteed jury vote for one of them, or does betrayal make her into a hurt and bitter juror?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think it really would depend on how they frame it at the end. I think she would be really emotional, but I could also definitely see it being that thing of like, Carolyn, I love you, and I needed to vote you out because you would have beat me. And I do think she buys that. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think she is emotional and she's a Survivor player. And I really think she is like at her core a Survivor player. So I actually think she's still the most likely to vote for one of her people that she loves. You know what I mean? Which I think are the Jam Zams and the Carsons and the Frannies. You know what I mean? I think it was smart probably to like get Frannie out of there. Ultimately for Carson and Jam Jen, I think she was probably going in that direction. I think she's going to vote for someone she likes. I don't think she was going to vote for Danny to win the game, even if she thought he played a great game.
I mean, is there a time element too? Like, what was your experience like in the jury villa? Do you become less bitter or more bitter over time?
I think you become less bitter over time. Yeah. I think in general, like I definitely had a long time in new era terms between when I was voted out and when the final tribal came. Yeah, exactly. I do think someone like Ricard, who left the game only like 2 days before final tribal, and he left on the note of Xander saying, I might play the idol for you, and then not doing it. He was still really, really mad about that when it came to time to vote, so I do think like, I think with all these like personal things, I also think it hurts less if the person believes it made good game sense for you. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I think like Shan was very mad about Deshawn voting her out for a number of reasons, including that she thought it would weakened his position in the game. So it's like,
Yeah.
what are you doing?
Right.
You know what I mean? And that makes it like, so it was just this personal betrayal. And I can't even be like, and that was smart, you know?
Yeah, right.
So I do think if you betray someone and it's obviously a good move that does put you in position to win the game, I think that's a lot more, it's more able to be forgiven potentially.
Yeah. What do you think? Should we do 2 more questions?
Sounds good. Sounds
We have
good.
2 more. All right, you want to take this one from Andrea?
Okay, Andrew says, question, do we think that Carolyn wasted her idol or was it a good way to guarantee Danny going home? So we kind of talked about this. So I give my opinion. I don't know if you really gave yours, Stephen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in this spot, basically guaranteeing that they get to 3 is so important that
Right.
even if there is a chance she's wasting it, that it's more important. I mean, it's also really hard to play an idol, you know, when you know pretty much where the votes are going, you know, to have this opportunity to make sure you guys get to 3, to, you know, save someone you care about, to do something, you know, vivid for the jury. I think it's, even though like technically it wasn't necessary, it does have a lot of like positive good for her. And just from a defensive perspective is I still think the right move. I mean, of course,
Yeah.
like, I mean, in an ideal world, would it be great for Carolyn to still have an idol and not have played it? Like, yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, to Evvie's point, you know, just holding onto the idol and not, you know, kind of doing like a want throwaway at the final 5, like that doesn't really do anything for her either. So
yes, I totally agree. And I think if Carson had gone out there and Carolyn got to the end and said, hi, I had this idol the whole time, he would be really upset about that, as he should be, because it wouldn't have been like, it's a good game move to keep 3 out of 6. You know, like, so like, and I think I don't know if we landed that as hard when we were first talking about it, but like, given the numbers as they are, it is such a smart move to try to keep your 3. And I do think this 3, obviously they're going to try to come for each other. That's Survivor, but like, it's still worth it to try to keep that.
And what's great is that they're such different players that they can all think, I have a shot against these 2. You know, I could beat these 2 because like, here's my story, you know, where there's not that obvious sense of this guy's the standout player here. We got to get rid of them.
Stephen, what's your gut instinct? If it was the Tika 3 is the final 3, who wins that?
I think Jam. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I mean, honestly, like tonight I was like thinking Carolyn because of, you know, she obviously has a lot of love from, you know, from Franny, from Matt, potentially because of Franny, you know, or maybe because he came to that conclusion by himself, you know, not just through his girlfriend. You know, I think that I really do feel like Jam is the kind of, you know, he's, I mean, and he's got a story. I think I've been saying he's building a story about like, excuse me, how he's, you know, he's eliminated everyone who came from him.
Yeah.
Now he's got this, you know, this immunity win, which we didn't even talk about. It was very fun, like last gasp challenge. Like, did you kind of wish when you were out there that you had like a last gasp or an eating challenge? Did you guys have you didn't have an eating challenge?
We didn't have an eating. I mean, just in general, I'll say, well, I think last gasp would have been kind of fun to try out for, I mean, in the, you know, fun Survivor waterboarding kind of way, you know? But I think in general, you know, I feel like it's been talked about a lot this season about the challenges and reusing the puzzles. And obviously, you know, I benefited from that in my season as well. I think like the fun, for me, the ideal thing with Survivor challenges is that it is a mix of different skills.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing to have a challenge like last gasp, that it's like a mental game or like a knowing how to like prevent water from going in your mouth game. And you want some of those, and you want some endurance, and you want some strength, and you want some brand new puzzles for people who are really good at puzzles. And I think you do want some occasional reused puzzles for the super fans to get to, you know, have that skill. And I think when it's not the same thing over and over again, that's really the fun part. And there's nothing like last gasp, you know, so you got to have it. Like, that's
can't
so fun.
Screen print that. Although we did learn that Carson was practicing it as in his bathtub. Probably hard to simulate currents in your bath. Maybe he was like splashing.
I mean, and it didn't work. So
it was like did Jam give like a shout out to Austin from Survivor Panama, right? Was Austin Cardi Survivor Panama? Was there a lot?
Or was he? Yeah. There was yes. Austin like O-E. There was also Austin.
Oh, there's
who
Austin
didn't have clothes.
O-S-T-E-N.
But
I think
I think it was I think you're right. I think it was Panama.
I don't know.
He was always saying stuff like big stud, but I don't think they did last gas in that one.
And you also, you know, with also Nick, oh gosh. Well, anyway, this is so embarrassing.
Yes, Nick, Austin, Terry.
Yeah.
Lamina.
Yeah, the Lamina crew. Yeah, maybe he was, I remember, I mean, that's like just one of the iconic images for me from Survivor. Just like that, like desperation to
Yes.
breathe through this, like
Yes.
your hands.
Did Brenda win that in Caramoan? I think I love, it's always so fun when the person who wins is so in it that they don't even know that they
I know.
won, as Jam Jam did. Like he was in it. That was awesome. I was so happy for him.
That was a very fun moment. Yeah. And
Yeah.
again, like great. I mean, I don't know. Do challenges matter for winner?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I do think there is something very true about that. They happen not in front of the jury or not in front of all the members of the jury. But I do think it adds to the like, especially when it can like take out someone big. You know what I mean? I think when you can say like Carson last episode can say, you know, I took out Franny because I'm the only one that beat her in the immunity challenge. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I think stuff like that when it can add. Certainly when Erica was the one that finally beat Ricard at a immunity challenge, that was huge. And honestly, the jury didn't get to see how big the advantage that she found was in helping her win that challenge. And, you know, that probably
Ricard still was right there. Like that was a very close, like it was a nail biter even with, I mean, was it as much of a nail biter? I'm telling you, it was a nail.
No, I wasn't there. No, I didn't see
there.
it. I saw the TV version. And honestly, the imagined version, maybe it was more of an Erica Blowout. So, you know.
Right.
But yeah, I was just also going to say on the who wins of this, and then we can like take our last question or whatever. But I think the gender breakdown of the jury also really matters in terms of the perception of people's games. And I do think that Carolyn is possibly going to be someone that would be more respected by women. And I do think that if she's up again in a jury with more women, I mean, we saw Franny connected with her very deeply. I think some of the other women, like in the, you know, Mom's reward that they went on, like I think she has a really good case potentially against if there's more women on the jury.
And so right now the jury is like Franny, the one woman, then Kane, Brandon, Matt, and now Danny, right? Is that
right?
That's the four of them,
right? And I don't think that's a good jury for Carolyn. And I think if it's her and like Jamie and Lauren, I mean, well, then it's three women, so then you maybe take the gender part out on some level. But like, I do think that it's better for her if there's more women on the jury. Is my gut instinct.
All right, well, this is a good question to end on, or at least the last question, because Tubby Lunchbox wants to know, question, what are Lauren and Jamie's plans after flipping to Tika's side? This is the big question. What do Lauren and Jamie do now? Yes,
that is a great question. Okay, so you've got Lauren and Jamie. You have to imagine, I would think that they're going to try to team up with Heidi, and at least that's 3, but that's 3 out of 6, so maybe that's not smart, and maybe they just, you know, try to go with the 3 Tikas and say, let's get Heidi out and then we'll battle it out at 5. And one of them's likely, you know, one of them's going to get that spot, you know, if not both of them. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's also potential that they still see Carson as a very viable, I mean, they also now can try to pitch, you know, Carolyn's a big threat. Carolyn just made a move. Now we need to all get out Carolyn, you know, so I do think they have options. I think they're in a better spot than Heidi is because they are still a 2. And so, yeah, I still do think they have options, even if I don't know that this was the optimal move.
Do you think they don't recognize how close the Tika? Like we're seeing the story of the Tika 3. Like maybe they just don't recognize how much of a tight 3 that, because they voted against each other at times. They have these blow-ups.
Right. It probably was good for them that they didn't vote together in the last round. Like, I think that probably did help. But, and like, and the fight, like you said, but I mean, it's right. And I do think that's one of those things. It feels more fluid out there. Certainly Jamie keeps saying how fluid it is, and maybe it's not. So I do think it's possible. I also think there is, because this 3 is 3 Stooges energy, you know, maybe they do feel like they're more precarious than they are, you know, when you can really see what they're saying and doing and the level that we get as viewers.
Yeah.
Evvie, any other thoughts on the episode or like the season as a whole that we haven't talked about yet?
Oh man, I mean, we've you know, everyone said it on everything this season, but like this is an amazing cast. The casts in the new era have been just like so great, and you know, like, you know, Danny's probably the type of person that I look at on a Survivor cast and I feel the least connected to, and look how funny and ridiculous he was, you know. And so I mean, I just like, and obviously Carolyn, we're like, we need Carolyn on every single season of Survivor, you know. Yeah, no, it's just been really, really fun. And like I was just reflecting on that, you know, we talked so much about the new twists and blah, blah, blah. And like, I literally just said before, you know, the old school way of finding an idol in a tree, you know? So it's like, it all shifts, people. It's Survivor. We love Survivor. I think this was a great episode of Survivor. And yeah, I'm so happy I got to talk about it with you, Stephen.
Oh my gosh. It's been truly a pleasure for me. I mean,
to be speaking to you and B, not to be speaking to Rob.
Yes, the double win.
So no, but and this has been so great. I mean, like you reminded me that we'd played one online game together, but otherwise I haven't really ever spoken to you. And
No, we never got to like talk Survivor. So
I know this is really fun.
cool.
I love you so much on your season. I mean, no, truly, you just had so much joy, and I've said that to you before. I mean, I think I emailed that to you, but like you just so much joy, and it was so obvious how much you loved the experience you were having, which is ridiculous. It's a miserable experience. Like, why were you so happy all the time, Evvie?
Yeah, that's so nice. I mean, as a legend once said, Survivor's not fun, except it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and no, seriously, Stephen, back at you. I mean, watching you, and it's like the nerds. Look how far we can go, And yeah, no, it's really an honor to get to chat about this with you.
Well, anything like going on with you that you want to tell the people about, or
I got nothing going on to plug except I was like, oh great, the next thing I do, I can say watch this episode of Know It Alls. So
yeah, that's great. That's right.
Yeah.
All right.
Follow me on social media, whatever. You'll see me liking Muna. That's what's going on my Instagram right now. So
all right. Well, I guess with that in mind, Scott, can you give me the okay, here we go. Coming up on oh my gosh, this is the most harrowing part for me.
Now you're the host, man.
Yeah. It's all right. I got that Know It Alls that's happening right now. You're watching it or listening to it as whichever. There will be an exit interview with Danny, and that's going to be coming up soon as well. So find out what Danny has to say about where he went wrong and what happened. And I'm sure there will be De Niro themed questions as part of that as well. The recap show, that's going to be Rob's hobnobbing in Toronto. So that's, they're having a fantastic time there.
What a fun episode to watch live. I feel like
really, that's a great point. So many big moments that I'm sure just were like, great fun.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun so that'll be the recap episode for this week. Then we'll have the Survivor feedback show, RHAP B&B with Liana and Mike Bloom. And then Survivor Global with the great Shannon Gus. I do not know who her guest will be this week because there's a question mark there. Then Why Blank Lost with David and Jessica. Find out which rule Danny broke. And then we'll have the Stock Watch with Taryn, followed by the great Purple Pants podcast anchoring the week.
Wait, Stephen, who gets the fishy?
Oh my gosh. Wow. I didn't even think about it. Thank you, Evvie. What I don't know. I mean, I guess like whoever, you got to give it to Carolyn, right? Except, I think, she sniffed the vote for Carson, played the idol for Carson. And it didn't seem, you theoretically give it to the person who flipped Jamie and Lauren, but we don't really have a sense of who that was. So yeah, Carolyn gets the fishy. Thanks, Evvie. Is that right? Is that right?
That's what I would have done.
Well, you have a Jaggy? The Jaggy?
The Jaggy.
The Jaggy?
The Dr. Jag science word. Yeah. No, yeah, I co-sign Carolyn for sure. Yeah.
All right, and coming up right now, the Big Brother Canada eviction recap for season 11, week 9. And that will be something you won't want to miss if you like Big Brother.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Thank you so much again, Evvie. This has been such a pleasure to have you on.
So fun. And obviously we're just joking. Love you, Rob. And really, really glad I got to do this. So, I like you, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Evvie. And thank you all for listening. And we'll be back next week.
Not me, but you will.
Well, I'll be back. Right.